Hey everybody, welcome to Photo Talk on the Days Between, sort of like coffee talk, but about photographers. Honored to have four amazing photographers here with me today who I can all call dear friends. We've been shoulder to shoulder many times shooting, although maybe not so much with Herbie because he's not a live shooter like the four of us are. But I've got these four incredible people, and as you can see up here on the screen, you can see all their names and their websites. Give you a few minutes to write those websites down. We've got Herbie Greene, we've got Bob Minkin, myself, Ed Perlstein, and Susana Millman. All of us are big Deadheads. We've all been inspired by the music of the Grateful Dead for years and years and years. This music means a lot to us. And we've been fortunate enough to bring cameras and have opportunities to photograph these band members. And these photographs that we've been taking for decades and decades, starting with Herbie back in 1965, are part of an important archive of the Grateful Dead history, as well as pop culture history in general. And so we're all very fortunate to have contributed and be part of that body of work. We're doing this as a benefit for the Rex Foundation. And for those of you who don't know about the Rex Foundation, it was founded in 1979, I believe. Maybe, oh no, I'm wrong. Strike that. I don't know what year it started, but I think it was in the early 80s. But they've been doing benefit concerts, and all of these people that you're seeing here today have been part of the Rex Foundation journey. We photograph their benefits, we document them, we donate artwork and photographs that they can use to raise money for the Rex Foundation, which then they take that money and give it to smaller organizations to help support things that they're doing, whether it's music or school or art or environmental, voters' rights, whatever it might be. And so the five of us have contributed to this overall historical visual take on the Grateful Dead. We've all been published in numerous books. I have a cover here of a book called Eyes of the World, which came out a couple of years ago. And I'm showing you this book cover because all five of us are in this book. And that's the way it is frequently when books on the Grateful Dead are published, or new CDs come out, or magazine stories are put out, historical retrospectives. They come to us for our photographs. And we keep digging deeper and deeper into the archives and keep finding incredible things and sharing them with all of you. And so we're going to start here with Herbie Greene as our first presenter, and everybody's going to take about 10 minutes and talk about 10 photographs that they've taken of the Grateful Dead. And Herbie's an old friend of mine. I've known him for decades. Me and Herbie actually did an art exhibit together back in the 90s called Rock in the 60s, Roll in the 90s, where we did matching portraits, a portrait that Herbie did of Jerry Garcia in the 60s next to one I did of Jerry Garcia in the 90s. Paul Kantner from the Airplane, Paul Kantner from the Airplane, Grace Slick, and so on and so forth. It was a very, very fun thing we did many, many years ago. Herbie has published a couple of books, one called Book of the Dead, another one called Sunshine Daydream, both on the Grateful Dead. Both are out of print, so just go look online in the used book section of the universe, and you can hopefully find them. They're both brilliant documentations of the Grateful Dead and Herbie's work. And Herbie has been published over and over again, and I adore his work. Herbie was one of the rare people that in the 60s shot with a medium format camera, which is a camera that did a negative that was 2¼ inches by 2¼ inches or 6 by 7 centimeters, depending on the camera he was using. His work is brilliant. His portraiture is brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear friend, Herbie Greene.
You're too kind, my friend, too kind. So my life has been defined by these bozos. My first encounter with them as a group was on this day. We made this photograph at Fort Point on the San Francisco side. I guess that would be right. What can I tell you about him? Jerry affects me to this day. Not a day goes by, as they say. Meeting him way back, I guess it was 64, maybe, at a folk club in North Beach. I walked up after the set and introduced myself to him, and he was very, outgoing and very approachable, and I loved him then. And this thing started to evolve into the electric. I was going to state. I was the long-haired guy with the camera, and so everybody kind of used me. Anyway, there you go. Now we're talking when they lived at 710 Ashbury, which is wonderful in that the whole community, there was an open door policy, and you could always go in there. You know, I mean, there's always somebody up, and hopefully it wouldn't be Neil Cassidy from my point of view. And these guys never paid much attention to the way they look, except for Pigpen. There was a clothing store down the street called Pacifica, run by Peggy Concerta, who was Janis Joplin's lover. And she loaned him the coat, and Phil, so you can see the price tag on it. Peggy later told me that he didn't really deserve to wear a new coat, and that's why he left it on there, because he didn't want people to think he was spending money on doodads. And speaking of doodads on the wardrobe, our friend Pigpen, Ron McKernan. Tragic story in my life. I think Geraldine gave me Pigpen's personal copy of Wind in the Willows, and it said, book, Ron McKernan, and Mariska somehow got it, I think. Anyway, it's gone, and that's one of those regrets. You think, oh geez, and oh geez, that was Jerry talk. There he is, and we were all so confident. It was kind of fun being, just like. Again, the guy with long hair in the camera, everybody related, and there weren't that many of us to relate to. So it was pretty easy getting the rest of that scene down on celluloid or whatever you want to call it, and with the stuff in the background. That's another long story, but I've told it too many times. There you go, that's great. What a bunch of jokers. Phil Lesh, I met him at the Meme Troupe when he was making tape music with Steve Reich. And the Meme Troupe is Ronnie Davis, and we put on show. I was stage manager, and we put on shows and Commedia dell'arte shows in the park. We came hauling up in an old Land Rover Jeep piled up with the platforms that made the stage, and we'd set the stage up. And anyway, that's how I met Phil. And the captain, oh gosh, this is made for at Gene Esterboo's house, which is on Buena Vista West, overlooking the ocean. And from the ballroom, which was built by the Spreckles family, in the ballroom you could see the Golden Gate and the Bay Bridge from different viewpoints, from different windows. Really impressive. And Gene was an audiophile. Recorded these guys. They did Stealin' and Don't Ease Me In. Yeah, I remember them. It's funny because I got to listen to those guys work up some of these songs. And it's just like, yeah, that's why one of the reasons it's fun to listen to, because every now and then you say, oh, I remember that. And American Beauty. This is at 710. I've got a blotter here. I hope you guys should put it on, that we did for Jerry's birthday. Mikio, the famous Mikio, and I collaborated on this. And that's I don't know, something about this is, and I want to call it photograph iconic, which is a word tossed around too often, like genius, God, we're all idiot savants as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, enough of that. The day that Led Zeppelin came into my life, here they come too, barging in, shooting off guns, amazing stuff. Dark Star. It's a really sad day for me. Off the rack, I was like, the social lubricant had got to me, and I was fucking an alcoholic. And I had to face up with that. And a couple of days after this, I ended up at my first meeting. And anyway, I said, Jerry, the women are driving me to drink. And he said, Herbie, they drive me to dope. I said, oh, That's when I figured that one out. Yeah. Interestingly enough, coming across Garcia at different points in my life was always great. It wasn't like I saw him every week, you know. Sometimes it'd be months. Sometimes I don't think it ever went by a year, maybe in the early, the 70s, perhaps. Hello, Brent. Brent walks into Front Street, greeted by them, and we take a picture. I think that was, I could be wrong. The first day Brent walked into Front Street. And the Swan Song, total chaos, one of the worst memories of my life. It's documented on YouTube. This isn't the one I ended up with, which is another long, long, long story. And with that, I will bid you good night.
Thank you, Herbie. Appreciate it. The beautiful commentary of Herbie's photos. Yeah, I love this Bob Dylan shot. I think this was taken backstage in Oakland. Is that correct? At a set break of a show. Is that when you did this Bob Dylan Grateful Dead shot?
Backstage, Henry J. Kaiser.
Got it. And of course,
what a great venue. I mean,
yeah.
That was right before they outgrew it real fast because of the In the Dark stuff. But boy, what a great venue.
And this, of course, was in anticipation of the Dylan and Dead tour, which would happen. This was taken, I believe, in March of '87, and then the tour happened in July of '87.
It was the Mardi Gras show, I think.
Right, so it was March, correct. And I love the portrait with Brent when he first joined the band and the energy that those guys had, because as we know, not an easy group of people to corral in order to get them to sit for a photograph. All right, well, thank you, Herbie. And tell real quick, that last portrait you did of Garcia, the one right before the one with Brent, what was that one shot for? That ended up on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine when Jerry passed away 25 years ago. 25 years ago today, that was the photograph that Rolling Stone used. What did you originally shoot that portrait for?
It was just part of the sitting. It was my turn. It was on a rotation. You got your turn. Marshall got his turn. I got a turn. It's once like every 10 years. Seriously. No, it was just part of what I did. And each of my sittings, I had a different look because I had enough time in between them to develop further as a photographer.
Right.
But it was true. So you can see from the beginning to the last stuff, I grew along with them.
Yeah, I mean, that very first shot that we showed is the Warlocks. I mean, they weren't even the Grateful Dead then. So Herbie was on the scene in the Haight-Ashbury and in the mid 1960s. Thank you so much, Herbie, for your time. Now we are going to move over to my old pal, Bob Minkin. I first met Bob in the parking lot of Nassau Coliseum in 1979 at a Grateful Dead concert. Go figure. Bob saw his first related Grateful Dead concert, which was the Garcia Saunders Band at the Capitol Theater in Passaic, New Jersey on November 9th, 1974. He was 15 years old. So many of us, tapped into that experience, right then and there when we were, that age. Of course, Bob was inspired by Herbie's work and Jim Marshall's work and so many other photographers. And so he started bringing his camera to more and more concerts. He really began his creative career as a graphic designer many, many years ago. He weaved in photography to become full-time with his graphic design business. And so, Bob's designed CDs for the Grateful Dead back in the 2000s. He was designing a lot of the Dick's picks, I believe, or they were maybe Dave's picks by then. I don't remember. Anyway, he's a very accomplished graphic designer and an accomplished photographer, and he's been photographing these guys now for 45 years or so. So, Bob, why don't you take the reins and tell us about your photographs and your experience photographing the good old Grateful Dead.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, everybody, for having me. I'm certainly in great company here with all my friends. So I'll dive right in. The shot you see here. So in the summer of '77, I was 18 years old, just graduated high school, had read On the Road by Kerouac and The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test by Tom Wolfe, and I was dying to come out to San Francisco. So I made that happen in August flew out, and in my wanderings around the city, I came across a poster for a Jerry Garcia band show that was coming up in a few days. So I made my way down to the show. It was easy to get up against the stage. It was the thing that was so amazing was how laid back it was. I mean, Jerry drove up in his BMW, parked and got out with his guitar and went in through the front door. So here we have Jerry Garcia on a breezy sunny afternoon in San Francisco, August 12th, 77, with a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, Travis Bean guitar, with the ass, gas, or grass, nobody rides for free sticker. This is probably my first really good shot of Jerry. And here we have Jerry on another beautiful sunny afternoon, this time at the Frost Amphitheater in May 77. I used this shot. I love this shot. I used this shot on the cover of my Just Jerry book, which is kind of fading in and out of here. And for this trip, my wife and I timed coming out to San Francisco area to catch 2 Dead shows at the Frost. And then the following weekend, there were 2 shows at Laguna Seca. So, you know, the lighting was perfect. The vibe was cool. The Frost is definitely one of my favorite outdoor, theaters to see the Dead. And I'm glad that they started having some shows there again. And this interesting shot here is what's going on. This is at a press conference in New York on January 9th, 1979. This press conference was made for college media, and it was sandwiched between the Grateful Dead's Madison Square Garden shows and their Nassau Coliseum shows. And I was able to get into it with a press pass, and the whole band was there except for Donna for some reason, I don't know. But as you notice, the Daze had cassette decks for people who were recording all the talking and stuff. And at one point, one of the decks made a loud click. And at the same time, Jerry, Billy, and Mickey reached forward to flip the tape for the lucky person. And here we have a great experience. This was taken during that same trip my wife and I did to the Frost. This was the following weekend at Laguna Seca. They actually filmed the Touch of Grey video that night. I believe this was May 10th, 1987. And by this point, I was getting really good access to the shows and to the band. And so here, I anticipated them coming on stage. So I went up ahead on the stairway and waited at a landing. And it turned out they congregated there for a few minutes. So I was just like a fly on the wall with my wide angle lens, being able to get these shots. And it was a great experience. I got to meet Jerry that day, and hang with him for almost an hour. It was like being in heaven. So this shot of Jerry in the red shirt, the saying back then was trouble ahead, Jerry in red, trouble ahead, something like that. This was an important show for me because this was taken at June 28th, 1985 at Hershey Park, Pennsylvania. And this is the show actually I met Dennis McNally at. And we hit it off. And from that point on, I was pretty much golden with getting access to shoot shows from the pit and backstage. And this was one of the great shows of 1985. They actually did a first set, Comes a Time, 3 Jerry songs in a row, Birdsong, Comes a Time, and Deal, and even a Morning Dew in the second set. Jerry in a blue blazer and a red shirt on yet another rainy outdoor show. This is one of my more well-known shots from Asbury Park Convention Hall, July 26th, 1980. This was a Jerry Garcia band show. So what happened was my car was broken down and my friend Cliff's car worked, but he wasn't registered. So we took the plates off of my car, put them on his car, and then drove from Brooklyn down to Asbury Park. And outside the show, I was selling some of my photos, and this guy said, "I can't use this ticket. It's first row ticket. Would you trade me some pictures for it?" I said, "Sure. How many do you want?" So I was able to get a first row seat for the late show and was able to get this set ending shot right here. This was taken during another trip out to San Francisco. I came out here many times before finally moving here. This was in the summer of '81. And as luck turned out, I got to see Jerry play at the Keystone in Berkeley, which is a place, of legend, where they filmed where they recorded the Garcia Saunders album. And, I love that album. And the venue itself is tiny. And 2 days later, they played at this place here in Fairfax. Fairfax is a little kind of hippie town in Marin County. And this venue is really just a rec hall with a stage about a foot off the floor. It was billed as Jerry Garcia's birthday benefit for the Fairfax School District. And Phil was one of a handful of times that Phil Lesh played the whole show with the Jerry Garcia band. They served cake, had balloons, and by this point I was convinced I had to move to Marin County to see more things like this. And here we are back in New York. This is in November 77. November 77 was an amazing month to be in New York and to be 18 years old and into the dead. In early November, I went up to upstate New York and saw two of my favorite shows. I saw Rochester and Binghamton on November 5th and 6th. Then towards the end of the month, the Garcia Band and Hot Tuna separately, but overlapping, like toured at the same time. Like one night, Tuna was at the Capitol. The next night, Jerry was at the Capitol. In fact, the night before this show, I went to the Garcia's early show at the Capitol, then drove into New York to catch Tuna's late show. I mean, we thought we were so cool doing stuff like that. But this was the next night, November 27th, 1977, Cats Under the Stars backdrop, Maria Moldauer in the band, and me with my Konica rangefinder camera, learning the ropes. Here's one of my most favorite shots. It's kind of a moody, deep shot I took during the Grateful Dead's Europe 81 tour. When I found out the Dead were going to go back to Europe in 81, I was too young for Europe 72, and that was one of the first albums I listened to, and I was like, I'm not going to miss this. So I figured it out, pre-internet days, not easy to do, but got it all together, passport, flights, and went to, followed the tour. This particular show or shows were, they had canceled 2 shows in France and made up for it by doing 2 surprise shows at this little hash bar in Amsterdam called the Melkweg Club. And it was really unusual because they played songs they hadn't played before, brought things back into the rotation like Turn On Your Love Light, and even did an acoustic set, which was pretty rare by this point. And here's Jerry deep into the acoustic set on Bob Weir's birthday, the night of October 16th, 1981 in Amsterdam. And this is the last shot of my series here. This brings me back to being 18 years old and San Francisco at Winterland. And after being there that summer, I was dying to go back again. And, the famous Grateful Dead New Year's shows beckoned me. So I didn't really have much money, so I was able to cobble together a trip where I took a train from New York on Christmas Day to Chicago, then took a Greyhound bus, all solo, to San Francisco. When I got there, I lost my wallet that had my tickets, my money, and it was like a disaster. But I'll tell that story another time. But it all worked out, and I got tickets for all 3 nights. And again, it's just so laid back. I was able to make my way right up to the stage, and they were tuning up, starting to do the first notes of Jackstraw, and Jerry just looked right at me, and I was mesmerized for a second, and then pressed the shutter and took one of my favorite, most iconic shots. So that's it for me now today.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. Yeah, just classic. It's just so funny how we all have so many similar stories about, how we got our first shots and stuff like that. And the other thing that's just so interesting that I want to point out is that in the world of corporate rock and roll, by the mid 80s, all bands required you to have a photo pass to bring a camera into a concert. And the Grateful Dead, from day one until the last Grateful Dead concert in 1995, never required that. Anybody and everybody was allowed to bring a camera into a Grateful Dead concert anytime they wanted, no questions asked. Now, you couldn't get into the photo pit, but you could shoot the show from the audience. And I know me personally, I did that over and over again. So I think that I'm the next one up here. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Jay Blakesberg, and I live in San Francisco, California. I moved to the West Coast in the early 1980s. I saw my first Grateful Dead concert in 1977, and that was at Englishtown, a legendary concert, 105 degrees out, 100,000 people. And it was a year later that I brought a camera to a Grateful Dead concert for the first time. I was 16 years old, And that's this photograph right here. And this was taken at the Meadowlands on Labor Day weekend, 1978. I think it was 9/2/78. And I borrowed my dad's camera. My dad had just bought me my first camera a couple of months earlier in the summer, and it was a Yashica, but I only had a 50 millimeter lens. And I knew I was going to a stadium concert and the stage would be far away. I didn't also know that the stage was going to be 20 feet high or 18 feet high as well. I mean, this is the only view you could actually get of the band. The monitors were so big. And so my dad loaned me his Pentax camera and a couple of longer lenses. I think I had a 135 and a 200 millimeter lens. And I took some photographs. And my goal was to develop these in the darkroom in my basement of my mother's house and throw them up on my wall with some thumbtacks and just kind of, create that memorabilia. So that was really my only goal in life at that point, was to take pictures and give them to my friends and hang them up. This particular shot is New Year's in 1979. So this is, again, one of those legendary runs. This is the first year after they closed Winterland. I think Bob's last shot was the 77, 78 New Year's. The next one was 78, 79. Closing in Winterland, and this shot with the balloons here with Jerry is 1979, 1980. And like Bob, I took a Greyhound bus across country, got off in Reno, met up with some Deadheads that I had met at Red Rocks the summer before, and drove over the mountain with them and went to Oakland for 5 nights. And it was a pretty typical experience for us because I knew I wanted to photograph some of these shows, but I knew I also wanted to have fun and drop acid. So my plan was to photograph the first, third, and fifth night, the 26th, the 28th, and the 31st, and drop acid on the 27th and the 30th. And so that's pretty much what I did. And of course, at midnight, the giant butterfly goes flying across the stage, and Bill Graham lands on the stage with the wings that have the Steal Your Faces on it. The balloons fall. It's Sugar Mag, and it's like, as a kid from New Jersey who's 18 years old, your mind is just completely blown. Like, this stuff doesn't happen in New Jersey, doesn't happen in New York. This is a Bill Graham San Francisco thing, and it was just mind-boggling and just so exciting to be part of that. Of course, in 1980, the Grateful Dead did a 15-night run at the Warfield Theater in San Francisco, followed by 2 shows at the Sanger Theater in New Orleans, and then 8 nights at Radio City Music Hall. And I flew out for the first 3 and the last 3 shows in San Francisco at the Warfield. These were the shows where they did an acoustic set, followed by 2 electric sets, and it was, of course, came out as a live record years later. And I think actually they reissued one of these shows or part of this music on vinyl for Record Store Day. I think it was a year ago, and they ended up using my photographs from this show on that vinyl package. And I like to call this shot Jerry in Red. I know Bob mentioned his red T-shirt shot, and I have one of those also from the Frost in '86 where Jerry's wearing the red T-shirt. And yes, I say the same thing. Jerry in Red, trouble ahead. Trouble ahead, Jerry in Red. Anyway, I just call this Red Jerry because of the red lights. But to me, this is like the epitome of Garcia on stage. This is Jerry in a deep moment. It could be a Morning Dew or a Comes a Time, or a deep Jerry ballad at the end of the second set. And these are the moments that we live for as a photographer, as well as Deadheads. These moments that were transcendental, these moments that were incredibly profound. The words of Robert Hunter and the music of Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead moved us immensely and changed our lives in so many ways. And so to be able to capture a photograph like this, for me, is really special, because that is the essence of Jerry Garcia on stage at those peak moments that we all like to experience. This is a photograph that I took of Jerry Garcia at the Frost Amphitheater on October 10th, 1982. And I learned that Susana Millman's first shows that she photographed ever, the Grateful Dead, were these shows as well. It was the 9th and the 10th of October in 1982. And I did not meet Susana there, but I hitchhiked down from Olympia, Washington, where I was going to college, and went to these 2 shows. And then I hitchhiked back up to Olympia, Washington. And right when I got back to Olympia after this, I had found out that I had lost a court case I was involved in, where I had gotten arrested for possession of LSD with intent to distribute back in the spring of 1981, and was going to have to go back to New Jersey and begin a 5-year sentence in state prison for possession with intent to distribute. So it was a great show, and I got some great photographs, but some bad news came right afterwards. And that's a whole nother story for another time. about how that adventure played out. But again, this is one of those moments where Jerry's got that arm raised. You know, people always said that the Grateful Dead were kind of boring on stage to photograph. I completely disagree with that. Bob Weir was always very animated and exciting to photograph, and you just had to wait for those moments with Jerry, those flourishes with his hand and his arm, or those big smiles. And there were a lot of magical moments that I like to capture, and I know that, you know, Bob and Ed and Susana and Herbie also did as well. Although Herbie's not really a live shooter, shot the Grateful Dead live very, very few times for Herbie, but still had taken some of the most iconic portraits of the Grateful Dead. This is the first time I did a portrait one-on-one for an assignment. It was an assignment for the Golden Road magazine, which was a Grateful Dead fanzine published by Blair Jackson and Regan McMahon. And Blair called me up in early January of 1991 and said, hey, I'm going to be doing an interview with Garcia and Hunter, which I believe might actually be the only interview ever done with Garcia and Hunter, and asked me if I wanted to do the photographs. And so I went up to the Grateful Dead office, and they put me in this tiny little office, and Garcia came in and Hunter came in together, and they sat down and they gave me about 3 minutes because I think they were more interested in going have lunch than doing a photograph, which is what I find with most of these artists that have been photographed for 20, 30, 40, 50 years now. They're over the photo shoot. But as photographers, it's our job and our mission to come back with a great photograph, because why would a photo editor or an art director hire you again if you don't take a great photograph? So whether they give you 2 minutes or 20 minutes, you have to do your best. And this is perhaps my most iconic photograph of Jerry in terms of a portrait, and very well-known photograph. And Jerry loved to look over his glasses. I know he did this with Herbie as well, and probably many other photographers over the years. This is January 31st, 1991. And of course, I did the portrait of Hunter as well with Garcia. They actually were sitting next to each other this close during the whole photo shoot. And if you're looking at this photograph here, I was literally sitting on a desk in front of them in this tiny office, and I had room for one light. And like I said, I think I shot a roll and a half of black and white and a half a roll of color, and I was out. And then they went off and did the interview with Blair Jackson. But again, you know, we just lost Hunter not too long ago, and it was incredibly, incredibly sad to lose one of the most important poets, vocalists, bards of our time. And of course, the words and music of Hunter Garcia have so much deep meaning for all of us that we've been listening to these songs for 20, 30, 40 years, some of us, and these songs still have deep meaning every time we listen to them. So I feel honored and privileged to have been able to do a portrait of Garcia and Hunter, because I know there has not been a lot of this done before. I think that Herbie Greene has done a shot of the two of them together, and I don't know of any other photos of the two of them together, but there could be stuff out there. This is a portrait that I did of Jerry Garcia on December 10th, 1992. This was taken at an art gallery in Berkeley called the Roberta Weir Gallery. Very odd, because Roberta Weir had no relation to Robert Weir, otherwise known as Bobby Weir. And this was an art show, and I was shooting this for Rolling Stone magazine. And we were just in the little green room office, you know, behind the gallery. And it was me, and I think there was a writer for the San Francisco Bay Guardian, and Rolling Stone was there. And it was sort of just like a round table hang where we were just, you know, photographing and talking and chatting, and it was very casual. And I literally just, you know, got Garcia's attention a few times to get a few shots like this where he was looking at me, but it was all very candid moments. And you know, Jerry with one of his funny haircuts, but it is what it is. And I love this portrait because, again, I just love that Jerry Garcia smile. This next photograph is taken in David Grisman's living room in September of 1993. And I was doing a portrait session for the cover of Acoustic Guitar magazine. And actually, I'm going to show the photo of Jerry and David first. And so this particular photo here is the two of them, which ended up on the cover of the magazine. And Garcia, I knew, hated to be photographed and would not give me a lot of time, but I knew that if I gave him a guitar and let him play music, that he would sit there for longer. So they just started playing songs from the new record they were putting out. And eventually Garcia started singing. And I said to Garcia, I go, hey man, can you do me a favor and just hum the songs in your head? Because when you sing, your mouth gets all weird and wonky, And I don't want that on the magazine cover. Like, I don't want you to look weird, like you're singing or chewing gum or whatever. And so I think I'm probably the only guy to ever tell Garcia to stop singing. And this again is a private concert in Grisman's living room with just Jerry and David and myself. And then this next shot is from the same session, the black and white one with him smoking the cigarette. I really felt like this really is Jerry Garcia. I said, hey, if you want to smoke, I'd love to get a shot of you smoking because I really feel like that is who you are. And then this shot, which is the last one I'll show, is April of '95. They were filming a music video for the movie Smoke, which was with Harvey Keitel and William Hurt and Ashley Judd. And you could see Garcia was just tired and sweaty. It was the Garcia band. And this is the last time that I would be one-on-one with Jerry Garcia. And of course, we would shoot Jerry for the last time at Shoreline on June 4th, 1995. And then we would lose him just, shortly thereafter on August 9th, 1995, which is 25 years ago today from when we're doing this program. Today being the final day of Days Between. So that's it for me. Thanks for listening. I am going to introduce my old pal, Ed Perlstein, now. Ed began his photography career in the mid-1970s, and he worked closely with the Grateful Dead. He was backstage. He was on stage. He worked with a lot of other San Francisco bands. His work appeared in a lot of magazines like BAM Magazine and Rolling Stone. He worked on CD and DVD projects over the years. It was really a much simpler time where you actually could have access to these bands without there being a lot of blockers and people in between you kind of keeping you separate, right? And so Ed's first Grateful Dead concert was January 3rd, 1970 at the Fillmore East. And the first time he shot the Grateful Dead, which will be his first photo that he'll talk about, was September 3rd, 1975 in Golden Gate Park. And that was a legendary concert. In 1975, the Grateful Dead only played 4 concerts, and 3 of them, including this one that Ed's going to talk about, was actually billed as Jerry Garcia and Friends. The only show listed as the Grateful Dead that year was the show at the Great American Music Hall in August of '75, which later became One from the Vault. So Ed has been published a gazillion times in books and CDs and magazines and on. Welcome, Ed Perlstein. Tell us about your work and your work photographing the Grateful Dead.
Thanks, Jay. Well, as Jay said, I did a lot of work early in the 70s, taking pictures of the Dead. This photo of Jerry was taken at that September 28th, 1975 Golden Gate Park show where the Jefferson Starship opened. And, it was my first photo shoot. I just learned to use a 35 millimeter camera earlier that summer. And I got to this show so early, they ended up building the backstage around me. So there wasn't really a backstage. They hadn't raised the fences yet. So I just was hanging out. And I talked my way on stage saying that, Mickey wanted me to shoot, which is not far from the truth because I was friends with Mickey at the time. So I planted myself next to Keith, and I pretty much didn't move for the entire show because I was afraid of getting kicked off the stage. And so it was a good place to shoot from because Jerry would most of the time be looking towards Phil or Bobby or Keith. So I'd be looking to my side of the stage. I really like this photo because Jerry looks so happy here. And you can see Jim Marshall in the background. Jim was all over the stage shooting some great shots. This next shot is backstage at the Cow Palace on New Year's Eve, 1976. I was back there shooting. I guess by that time I had been turned the Dead onto some of my photos. They were familiar with me. They also BAM Magazine had started, Bay Area Music Magazine, and they were doing a cover of Bob Weir for their 3rd issue, and they called the Dead, and the Dead said, well, get in touch with Ed. He has some great shots. So I formed a relationship with BAM Magazine so I could have press access, and now I had a relationship with the Dead. So backstage New Year's Eve 1976, the Dead were waiting to go on after Santana had played, and Keith was late. And so they were just kind of hanging around waiting to go on, and I was able to shoot some great shots before Keith showed up. This next shot is probably one of my most famous shots. It was taken at Winterland on March 20th, 1977. And Winterland used to be an ice rink. It used to be the home of the Ice Follies. So it had wraparound balconies. The stage at this point was at the far end. And so, you could sit up in the balcony behind the band. So I would go and do some shoots behind the band and wait for band members to turn around and look at each other. And this was I don't even remember what song they were playing, but it was a very peak moment. Everybody's into it and the energy is apparent. This next shot is a rare shot of Jerry in a tie-dye t-shirt. I took this at Selland Arena in Fresno on January 15th, 1978. I didn't go there really to shoot. I was pretty much split. Sometimes I'd shoot a whole show, and then maybe the next night I'd dance and trip and whatever. So I was really torn between having a party and taking pictures. But this night I brought a couple of rolls of film, but I didn't bring any color. Who would know that Jerry would wear a tie-dye t-shirt that day? So so this is my black and white shot of Jerry in a tie-dye. This next shot was taken at Santa Barbara Stadium on June 4th, 1978. Now, this is one of my favorite shows to shoot. I had complete stage access and got to watch as, for instance, the Hells Angels had a chopper, a Harley Davidson chopper on stage, and they revved it up, or Parrish revved it up. I'm not sure who started that, right before Not Fade Away. And, you can hear it on the tape. It's really, really great. But I had full stage access, and this is Jerry tuning up, and I love how happy he looks. And it was just a great day to take pictures. This next shot is very interesting. Now, this was at the Oakland Auditorium on August 4th or 5th, I'm not sure, in 1979. Jerry was waiting to go on stage. It was a very dark area, and he basically posed for me with very little light. And I really like this picture just because it's a real nice portrait of Jerry, and it was a nice moment between the two of us. This next shot is Jerry backstage at the Warfield Theater. He was there. This was in 1980, March 25th, and Jerry was there to accept the Musician of the Year award. And so I was backstage, and it was nobody else was back there. And I basically said, "Hey, Jerry, would you pose for some pictures?" And he was glad to do so. And so I took a bunch of pictures of Jerry, and that was a fun shoot. Well, this next shot was at the Greek Theater in September of 1981. And, I just really like this picture because it shows a lot of energy in Jerry's positioning. And I love the backlit halo of his hair. For me, this is one of my favorite shots. This next photo was taken at the Greek Theater on May 15th in 1983. And as you can see, that's not Bob Weir playing guitar. That's John Cipollina, who had come on stage to jam with the Dead, with Courtney Pollock's beautiful tie-dye in the background. And John, with Bob Weir's guitar, obviously borrowed it for those few songs that he came on to jam. And Jerry's just singing up a storm. It was a great show and a cool moment. And this last shot is kind of, this was a day of mixed emotions. This was the Bill Graham tribute concert on November 3rd, 1991. It was so sad with Bill's passing. I had worked for Bill for a long time. I just felt very close to Bill. And here I was shooting the Dead and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and so many incredible musicians. And, so I was sad and happy to take pictures of my favorite musicians at the same time. But I like that this photo doesn't show that how sad Jerry must have also felt that day. It would have, and it would be almost 4 years later that the Deadhead community would gather at this same location, the polo fields, to memorialize Jerry after he passed. So, you know, those are the photos that I wanted to share with you today. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Ed. You know, that shot from Winterland is just one of my favorite live shots of the band. You know, it's not an easy task to get every band member in there, and you got them all in there. You got Keith over there, you got Donna, even her whole hand is just making it in. And then just the energy of Garcia and Weir and Lesh, facing backwards, obviously a peak moment, end of a song. Always one of my favorite, Grateful Dead band shots. So kudos on that one. And of course, great job on the 75 stuff, being a rookie and getting up on stage and making it happen, because half of what we do in our lives is figuring out ways to manipulate the system, buck the system, man, and get up on stage, or get in that special spot, or shoot to capture those unique moments, because as photographers, that's what we want to do. We want to capture those really special moments. So all right, we have one more photographer. We have Susana Millman, who's an incredible photographer and an incredible human being. Always enjoy seeing Susana when she's at a show and I'm at a show, and just giving this woman a hug, because she's a super special person, and she has a great story also. So she left an academic career teaching social psychology in New York City to study shamanism and psychoactive ethnobotany in South America back in 1977. She met a bunch of deadheads from San Francisco with similar interests, and she ended up seeing her first Grateful Dead concert at Winterland on 12/29/77. Legendary run of shows. She first shot the band, like I mentioned earlier, on 10/9/82 at the Frost. And I was there, like I mentioned. Also, Susana, I don't know if you remember this, but that was the West Coast debut of, I believe, both Touch of Grey and Throwing Stones were played for the first time on the West Coast at those shows. Just last year, or just a few years ago, 2016, she published her first coffee table book called Alive with the Dead, A Fly on the Wall with a Camera. And Susana is lucky enough to be walked down the aisle by Jerry Garcia at her wedding when she married one-time Grateful Dead publicist Dennis McNally. So let's hear some stuff from Susana, and telling us about her work and her adventure photographing the Grateful Dead. And of course, Susana has been published a gazillion times in other books and magazines and CDs and DVDs and Grateful Dead calendars, and the list goes on and on. A very accomplished photographer. Susana, it's all yours.
Thanks, Jay, and I'm honored to be included with this bunch of fabulous photographers, fabulous Grateful Dead heads, fabulous Grateful Dead photographers. I'm kind of a Joanna come lately in this scene, and I didn't start shooting until 1982. Now, sometimes, as Jay just said, at Frost, sometimes it's just a matter of being in the right place at the right time. And the first picture I want to share with you was taken on 6/14/85, the Dead's 20th anniversary concert at the Greek Theater. There was a press conference beforehand, and I happened to be standing next to a kind of doofus who raised his hand and said, "I understand you guys all take drugs, especially when you play. Are you on drugs now?" Dead silence from the band. He asked the question again, a little bit louder. This time Garcia cups his ear and goes, "Man, I hear him. I see his lips moving, but I don't hear anything." So he asked the question again, really loud. "Are you guys on drugs now?" And they all pivot around like their heads were on a single string and looked at him, looking at me, snapping the shutter, Nikon camera, F3. And so so I love this shot, and what I really love about it and makes me sad is how the five of them are totally together and Brent is apart. And that was sort of the karma of the Grateful Dead keyboard player during my time anyway. The next picture was actually taken earlier at Lincoln Center at Avery Fisher Hall on 11/18/84. Garcia and Kahn played, and Robert Hunter opened. I didn't know the intricacies of getting a photo pass then. It's a long story. Concert halls are really wicked to get photo passes in. Linda Kahn, bless her heart, finally convinced Parrish to give me a photo pass. Unfortunately, I missed Hunter, but I did get this amazing shot of Kahn with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. Can you imagine that going on in 2020? And Jerry, after the show, saying, well, man, I don't like playing acoustic so much, but at least I know I can busk in the subway if anything drastic happens. The next picture is the Greek Theater. I'd been trying to get this picture for years. Finally, I had the tripod, the right film, the right lens, the laminate, and went up on top of the Greek Theater to get this picture because it's a really terrific sense of place. And it was the band's favorite place to play. And this picture was taken 8/18/89, which is the penultimate Dead show at the Greek Theater. So it was just about my last chance to get it. So I get up there to the top with my tripod, and a blue coat approaches me and says, you know, these are for TV crews and you don't have a television camera. So doing something I very rarely did, I flashed my laminate and said, what part of all and all access don't you understand? And I got to take the picture. I will add that even though I had that laminate, I maybe couldn't get away with as much as any of the other guys if they chose to, because there might have been all heck breaking loose at my home. The next picture, I have no idea when this is taken, but I love this picture of Mickey because it just, even though it just really characterizes the intensity of Mickey and his closeness to the percussion instrument that he's playing. Now, this picture was taken for the back cover of Not for Kids Only, a sunny day in 1993 on Grisman's porch in Mill Valley. They were happy with their instruments. But they just held them. They didn't play. So thank goodness I didn't have to tell Jerry to stop singing like Jay did. And I really enjoyed being around Jerry with Grisman because they just smoked dope. You know, they just smoked cannabis. And Jerry was very happy, and there was a lot of laughs and a lot of sweet acoustic music. Now, this picture is taken in 1991. The Kyoto Monks, who were kind of the Dalai Lama's personal choir, and came to Mickey's attention because they can sing 3 notes in their throat at one time, did a tour of the United States, and the Dead, the Rex Foundation, Danny Rifkin, Mickey all got involved with supporting their tour. Now, I just want to say that my book, Alive with the Dead, A Fly on the Wall with a Camera, which is coming out again this fall, has a lot of pictures of the Kyoto Monks. But this time, China refused to publish the book unless I removed the pictures of the Kyoto Monks. Well, I was not going to do that. So it's going to be, it's actually being published by Last Gas Press and being printed in Korea. Okay, next picture. Next picture is taken on stage in Phoenix in 1994. This is Billy Grillo, biker, roadie, often seen with the shaved head, although here he had hair. I'm shooting on stage, always a little bit nervous when I did that. And he beckons to me. And I thought, oh my God, what have I done now? I'm going to be in so much trouble at home. And what is it? And so I went over to him, and it was actually very, very sweet. What he wanted me to do was take a picture of him and his beloved Rottweiler Caesar, because as you can see, they're wearing matching headphones. So it was a very sweet moment. Now here, sound and light. Dan Healy, Candace Brightman. It all started with the band, but IMHO, it wouldn't have been the same without these guys. Here's Healy at Shoreline in 1991, and Candace relaxing at the Radisson during a Cal Expo gig in 1990, I think. Okay. Come on, scroll. Now, here are two pictures of Jerry that I put up here together. The one on the left, the happy Jerry, is 1/26/93, Chinese New Year show during the Encore Gloria. Jerry was just so happy at that time. The picture on the right, 1995, during the Dead shows in Las Vegas in 1995, I call joy and pain, because you can see Jerry's great joy in the music, and also that he is in tremendous pain, especially in retrospect, looking back at this. And finally, this was the end of the Grateful Dead. A double exposure, 7/9/95. At fireworks after the show, as always, in Soldier Field, and I knew it was very important to stay for the fireworks, because I had the terrible feeling I would never get to see that again, and that is as it happened. So it's just been a wonderful experience being around the Grateful Dead and shooting people on stage, off stage, and I want to give a shout out also, to all of you guys, the photographers who have inspired my work, and second to Geraldine Brandelius, who in her book, The Grateful Dead Family Album, who really oriented me toward the Grateful Dead being one large, beautiful, dysfunctional family that put the fun in dysfunction. Out.
Awesome. Thank you, Susana. Really appreciate that. That last shot, the fireworks shot, is that an in-camera double exposure, or is that done in post-production afterwards in Photoshop?
That's a post-production. That is post-production. It's because obviously, they wouldn't have been playing with.
Oh, right, of course. Sorry, I'm not okay. Them. Right. So, although you could have overshot 2 rolls of film, but yes, you're right. I wasn't thinking. So
no. I was scanning. It was in camera.
Right. And is this the final photo? Is this the final show at Soldier Field, the band on stage?
Yes.
So that's Jerry's last show. Yeah.
That's Jerry's last show. Yeah.
Right. And of course, a month later, today, August 9th, 25 years ago, we would lose Jerry Garcia, and all of our lives would change drastically. Today is the final day of the Days Between celebration, where we celebrate the life and music of Jerry Garcia. We're all very, very privileged that we tapped into this experience when we did. All of us at this point are well over 40 years of having the Grateful Dead being part of our lives. I know I can speak for myself and probably all of you by saying that the Grateful Dead are incredibly important to our lives and our careers. on so many levels. Really all there is to say is inspiration, move me brightly. Anybody have any closing comments that they want to throw out here? Again, Bob Minkin, Ed Perlstein, Susana Millman, Herbie Greene. Please visit their websites and check out their work online. Google us, and I'm Jay Blakesberg. You'll find our work. Anybody have any final thoughts? Herbie.
Yeah, you guys are really dedicated in a whole different way. I know a lot of people like you. I had no idea that you were that deep. I want you to note what time it is.
Excellent.
Say good night, Gracie.
Good night, Gracie. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to the Rex Foundation. Thanks for the Days Between and everybody for helping out. Fans.com and dayglow.com for helping produce this hour-long segment. And, of course, Dylan Langill for editing this particular program for us. Thank you all so much. We'll see you out there. Cheers, everybody. And, let's always keep Jerry Garcia in our hearts, our minds, and our souls, because that's where we want to be. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night, Gracie.
Good night.
Night, Gracie.